Hello, one and all. I trust you are well. Today, I want to talk to you about pushing until you can't, or perhaps more commonly known as facing your giants. But I'd like to, as I say, talk about us pushing until we can't anymore. I'd like to share a little analogy, a little story with you. There was once a man who had a vision of this rock. And it's just a story, but he had a vision of this rock in his living room. And he woke up, he came out of the vision and he said to God, God, there's this rock in my living room. What should I do about it? And God said to him, just push the rock. So this man, every day before he went to work, he pushed this rock and he pushed for about 30 minutes and he pushed and he pushed and he pushed. And he did this on and on every day for, let's say, a good few years. Let's say 5 years he did this. He pushed this rock every day. He got up out of his bed and he pushed this rock. And one day, after 5 years, he fell down on his knees and he noticed that the rock had not even moved 1 inch. So he fell down in despair and he cried out to God. He said, God, I don't know what is going on. So God answered him and God said, well, what is wrong, my son? And the man said, well, I've had this rock in my living room and I've been pushing it for 5 years as you told me to, but it has not even moved 1 inch. And God said to him, my son, I never told you to move the rock. All I told you to do was to push. And he said, look how strong you are today. And, that just reminds me of our lives. We sometimes get these giants, if you like, that we have in our lives, and we think we need to move them out the way or overcome them. Yes, we do. But let's say we get these rocks in our lives and we think we need to push them out the way, but God only wants us to push against them. He will have the victory at the end of the day. He will fight the battle for us and he'll have the victory, but we'll come out strong. And I've got a reading today. It's four verses. It's 1 Samuel 17, verses 36 to 40. And this is when David has come out to see his brothers, and there's that ensuing battle between the Israelites and the Philistines, and David comes out and he starts talking to Saul. David says, your servant has struck down both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be like one of them, for he has defiled the armies of the living God. And David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. Then Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a helmet of bronze on his head and clothed him with a coat of mail. And David strapped his sword over his armor, and he tried in vain to go, for he had not tested them. Then David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not tested them. So David put them off. Then he took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the brook and put them in his shepherd's pouch. His sling was in his hand, and he approached the Philistine. Wow, what a story. Now we heard there that Saul even gave David his armor. He said, put this on. But David could not use the armor. David was not used to the armor. In fact, the armor was perhaps too big for him, too heavy for him. When we go into battles, we must not try and use other people's gifts or other people's power, other people's talents. God has given us our own abilities and our own power. If you like, our own gifts, our own talents to use. It says there that Saul said to him, go, and the Lord be with you. And we can actually read there that when David said that he had beaten lions and bears, that it was God who delivered him, or delivered those lions and bears into his hands. And he went with that same mindset. And today I want to share that. Before we get into that, let's imagine it like a world championship match, if you like. What is a world champion match? It's country against country. And sometimes one person represents a country. And in this case, the Philistine Goliath was representing the Philistines. Spiritually, he may have been representing sin. David was representing Israel, but he was representing God. And when someone or a team goes into a match, let's say a football match, and they're representing their country, they've got the support of their country, they've got the backing of their country behind us. And David didn't have the backing of the Israelites. We know. They were too scared. Saul tried to help him, he couldn't. But he had the backing of of God, didn't he? David had the backing of God behind him. He had the support of God behind him. And in this case, it actually says, if you read a little bit before, it said, Goliath challenged him and he said, if we win, if you win, you send one person out to fight me, and if you win, we'll be your servants, we'll be your slaves. But if I defeat that person, you'll be our slaves. So in this case, if David had lost, the Israelites would have been their slaves. But I can tell you now, we are no longer slaves to sin. Amen for that. God has said we are no longer slaves to sin. God has won that victory for us, folks. He's won it for us. We're no longer slaves to sin. I don't know if you've heard that saying that says, the bigger they are, the harder it is for them to fall. But God said to David knew in God's power, the bigger they are, the harder they fall when they hit the ground. And he knew that. So every step that David took, after he took off that armor, he picked up his staff, he picked up his sling, he picked up 5 smooth stones. And every step he took, he had already known he was going to have the victory. He was walking in the victory. And when we face our giants in life, let's say those giants are, I don't know, habits, temptations, fear, anxiety. What about an attitude, a belief? Whatever it may be. I mean, a lot of people are facing the giant of fear today. A lot of people are facing the giant of anxiety today. A lot of people are facing anxiety of not having a job. Where's my next meal coming from? But when David faced his Goliath, his giant, he was already, as he approached him, he was already walking the victory. And I believe God is telling us that we can walk in that victory even before we face our giants. As we approach our giants, we can walk in the victory because, you know what? Jesus is behind us. We have the support of Jesus on our side. We can walk even prouder, in fact, because we don't even need to fight. We can go into that, we don't even have to go in that battle. We can go in that battle, but we come out, not even with one bruise on us, because Jesus was bruised for us. He was flogged and beaten for us. But the only thing is, the only condition that changes when we come out of that battle is we are stronger. Like that man that pushed that rock, he came out stronger. Yes, it's great to celebrate our victories when we have overcome a battle, but we also need to acknowledge and glorify God too. Even though, and you know what, even though God has won that victory and we can walk in the victory because we've overcome that battle, we may still have, every now and then we'll get giants coming our way because they want a shot at the title as well. But you know what? They'll never get that title because God has won it all. There's a song that says, Jesus has won the victory. He's already won it, folks. Let's walk in that victory. If he's already won it, let's walk in it. Let's celebrate in that victory, knowing we don't even need to fight and we have that victory. So I just want to leave push, P-U-S-H, with you. Pray until something happens. Push that rock. Don't need to physically push it. Just get down on your hands and knees and pray until something happens. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. And I pray that as you go through this week, and you face those giants and you push those rocks, that you'll come out stronger on the other end. Amen.